I got an email a couple of days ago from one of the farmers who farms near the Knoflokskraal settlement on the right-hand side as you're heading towards past the N2 and so on, just after Elgin. And he writes, May has passed. The minister made an undertaking that May was when action would start regarding containment. I've seen no visible containment processes happening and occupants coming and going freely from the area. Attaches some photographs of new buildings that have been happening, and writes, while the land invasion remains an illegal activity, the farms on its boundary have plummeted in market value, and the bank valuers have accordingly adjusted the values down to the detriment of the investment the owners have in the property. No further capital investment, i.e. new orchards, can be made, as that investment cannot be recovered through a forced bank sale of the property. The Minister, Dean Macpherson, Minister of Public Works and Infrastructure, joins us now from Johannesburg. Thank you, sir, for making yourself available. Containment, where are we at in terms of settlement, I suppose, around Knoflokskraal?
What we did say is that we would start with the process to allow members of Knoflokskraal to start giving us information that would help us and assist us with the containment order that we will be lodging by the end of July. So I think that the farmer, with due respect, I think he's misunderstood the process. But what is important is that we did actually try to start with that process by allocating some drop-off points in Knoflokskraal for members of the community to bring us that information, and for us to be able to start explaining what containment and social facilitation was. And we were met, unfortunately, with a number of acts of violence that resulted in injuries to our personnel. People were arrested and then bailed. And the interesting point that I would make there is that the address that they gave for their bail hearing was, in fact, their own properties in Cape Town, which reinforces our view that a large number of people who are occupying Knoflokskraal actually have their own primary residences in Cape Town and surrounding areas. So we are proceeding with the court papers and the court order that we will seek, and we will be sticking to our plan by lodging those papers by the end of June.
And what will you ask for? What order will you be seeking from the court?
So we are seeking, John, from the court a number of points. One is to reaffirm the original containment order of 2021 and to expand it to include all 6 urban and not just the 3 that were originally obtained. The second order that we will seek is that a social facilitation process must be allowed to take place without hindrance or interference, so that we are able to understand who is occupying that land, what are the reasons, where do they come from, so that we can make genuine assessments of who has second properties or third properties, and who genuinely requires the social assistance of the state, so that we can implement the provisions of PI. And thirdly, we will seek an order that no individual may interfere with the duty of the Department of Public Works and Infrastructure, or stop the South African Police Service from executing any number of those court orders.
Is it your view that the people who live there now, all of them or most of them or some of them, should move from where they are living now?
Well, John, I think the point that I cited earlier is a good example, and our intelligence shows that that there are many, many people that are illegally occupying state land, selling state land, that should not be doing so, that have other properties elsewhere. As I said, the one time when we went there to go and deal with an issue, we had 600 vehicles pitch up to block the N2 and the accesses to Knoflokskraal. We know that there are people that have built houses that are probably much bigger and more valuable than many of your listeners, and they would not be considered the landless and destitute. And the only way that we can actually understand who may have a legitimate claim to state assistance for alternative housing is through a social facilitation process. And that's why, in our view,
do you see
and that's why, in our view, that there is a complete objection to that, because I think that there are a number of people that don't want us to find that information out and then be able to make that determination.
And if that determination says that 20, 30% of the people currently living there are in need of social assistance in the form of housing from the state, would you expect them to move off that property and accept that social assistance elsewhere?
Well, then what we would have to do is we would have to work within the provisions of the PI Act, and we would work with the local municipality and the provincial government, and we would say, where is the opportunity for suitable alternative accommodation? Because Knoflokskraal is not suitable for alternative accommodation because there are no services there. It is a problem for agricultural production and job creation in the area. And so, it's irresponsible for the state just to go and say to people that you must go live in the middle of nowhere without the correct services.
Well, their answer would be provide services.
Well, that's, a very expensive thing. I don't know if you've maybe gone around that area, but, the nearest service points to that from Theewaterskloof cost R1 million a month just for that area. And that municipality doesn't have the financial services or backing to do so. And so, those determinations can only be made through a social process that allows us to get that information. But, one has to ask, why is that process continuously stopped and blocked and halted and met with violence when we, at least on the very baseline, want to understand who is there and how are they there? And then that also allows us to deal with the very serious issues, John, where people have been selling plots of land for 1,500 Rand and then start building big houses on them as their second properties. So I think that we have to deal with this in a logical way, in a fair way, and also in a way that also acknowledges that there may be some people that need assistance, but there are definitely also people there that have taken advantage of the situation. And so it's unfortunate that we've got to the point that we have to go to court, but that is the only logical way forward now.
Many of the people who live there are quoted as saying that it is their ancestral homeland, that they have an historical right to reclaim their ancestral homeland. There hasn't been, to the best of my knowledge, there hasn't been a formal land restitution application for that. I don't know whether that's possible in terms of the sort of statute of limitations on when those claims could be filed. But is that, in your view, an issue to consider in any way, that people there claim lineage rights to be there?
John, we live in a constitutional democracy where people can follow the applicable laws and regulations to make those claims. Now, none of those groups there that claim to be cultural groups have sought recognition in terms of applicable legislation. No one has made a land claim to claim anything. And then that doesn't mean that you can then just go and unlawfully occupy land and say, well, I have a right to this land without being able to prove that through a legal process. Because if we were to accept that any person can go to any piece of land and say, I'm going to claim this on the basis of cultural or heritage or whatever purposes, we would completely have chaos across the country if that was the case. We are a lawful society. We must follow the law. And I have repeatedly said to those groups that please go and get yourself acknowledged and recognized and officiated as a cultural group or an indigenous group. You're more than welcome to do so. or you're also welcome to go and make a land claim and have that adjudicated through the Land Claims Commission and through the courts. But neither of those things have been done, and we cannot have a situation where people can just lay claim to land and say, well, I'm doing so on the basis because I have a historical right to do so.
Thank you very much. The Minister of Public Works and Infrastructure, Dean Macpherson.